My name is Peggy, and I am a compulsive overeater, and I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the gray sheet, and I commit those meals to my sponsor. I don't eat in between those meals, no matter what. Abstinence is the most important thing in my life, without exception. And one day at a time, I put this program first. And I am here to build a defense against the first compulsive bite, to build a fortress against the first compulsive bite. And by the gift of this fellowship entirely, nothing that I've done, just utter surrender. On 2 days ago, by the grace of this fellowship, I celebrated 32 years of back-to-back abstinence on the Cambridge Gray Sheet. And I want to start by just repeating that last phrase of my mantra, that I'm here to build a defense against the first compulsive bite, because that really captures everything for me. Every day, every minute of my life needs to be dedicated to building that fortress, to defend myself against that first compulsive bite. And I say that because that compulsive bite has a life of its own. It's got a mind of its own. It's got a force of its own. It's got a power of its own. And it plots. It plots to attack me when I'm least guarded. What I mean really is that I think that there's inside of me two competing forces, almost like dueling powers that are competing for dominance inside of me. And one is my disease. It's the disease of compulsive eating, and it's the disease of food addiction. It's a disease that wants me dead. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it wants me dead. I'm much more afraid of the disease of compulsive eating than I am of any other disease, COVID, cancer, all of them. I haven't had COVID, but I've had a lot of the other ones, including cancer and life-threatening medical situations, and none of them are as threatening to me as the disease of compulsive eating. I've had it all my life. It had me by the throat, gasping for breath for decades. It led me to a life of despair, hopelessness, of shame, desperation. It was a life in which I had absolutely no choices. I acted like I had choices. I did things, but I was constantly a slave to food. I hate to even use the term slave because it's a serious concept of slavery, but I've never found another way to describe what this addiction did to me, that I was a slave to the food. The food dictated my life, and it robbed me of everything inside of me. I simply could not stop eating. I couldn't stop eating. And when you can't stop eating, you can't do anything else. You can't function. You can't live a life. I had no agency of my own. I had no self-determination. Everything was thwarted. Everything was subverted by the disease. I had shame. I had shame of being fat. I, at one point, was defined as morbidly obese, which was horrifying to see that in writing. At my height, well, I don't know what my height was because I never got on a scale at my height. But the last time I was on a scale, I was probably 2.5 times the body size that I am today. I couldn't stop eating. But the despair and the hopelessness transcended being fat, because I also ate compulsively when I was thin, because I lost weight several times, many times, on Weight Watchers, on other programs. I lost 100 pounds here, 100 pounds there, and I still couldn't stop eating compulsively. And it didn't matter that I was thin, because I was hopeless, could not stop eating, and therefore I was continuing to be that slave. I was constantly either obsessing about food, figuring out ways to get food. I was crawling through winter snowstorms when the whole world was shut down. There was a famous blizzard of 78 in Boston when I was living in Cambridge. And for 5 days, there were no cars on the street. People were skiing in the streets. Nobody could get anywhere, but I managed to get food. I stole food from other people. I stole food from roommates. I stole food from communal refrigerators where I was working or in school. Other people's lunches, their precious food, their names were on the food. And I had absolutely no choice. I had to steal it. I stole money. I stole money from my parents when I was young. I stole money from roommates. I stole whatever I had to do because this disease robbed me of any morality. Ideas about right and wrong that I might have in the abstract, they meant nothing in the face of this disease. I had no ability to stand up to the ruthless cravings. They were ruthless, the cravings of addiction. But there's another power inside of me, thanks to GreySheet. I started off by saying it's like dueling forces. So the other power is the power of recovery. It's the power of that defense against the first compulsive bite, against those relentless, ruthless cravings of addiction. And the secret to that force is the gift of desperation. And it's a gift because in the 43 years since I first walked into a GreySheet meeting, which is a long time ago in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I've never doubted, even though I lost my abstinence when I put something else first after many years and had to claw my way back to abstinence, I never doubted that GreySheet is the only solution, the only hope for a desperate case for me. I never tried anything else. So it's a gift because the foundation of recovery is the first step. And it's the rock solid belief and acceptance of my own powerlessness. The first step, I am powerless over food, that my life is hopeless. They say unmanageable. That's an understatement. It's hopeless with the first bite. This is a cunning and terrible disease. And one of its tricks is that after someone, I speak for myself, gets a little bit of abstinent time away from food, some freedom from the tyranny of food and addiction, sometimes you start to feel like, oh, well, I guess I'm okay. I guess I can do it without GreySheet. Well, that's like going out in the rain with an umbrella and staying dry as can be and saying, oh, I'm not getting wet. I guess I don't need this umbrella after all, and tossing it away. That's the logic. And it's a denial. It's the disease. This disease has what we call a built-in forgetter, and it leads to downfall. So the gift of desperation means that it's a gift if I remember that I'm a desperate case. It's when I forget that I'm a desperate case, I lose that gift. And it's a gift because it's what keeps me completely dependent on GreySheet. I want to be tethered to GreySheet. And so let me just, in the little bit of time that I have left, let me just spell out some of the steps. These are just kind of an arbitrary set of things that I jotted down when I was thinking about sharing today. What are the things that keep my recovery stronger than the disease, in that duel to the death between the disease of addiction and the power of recovery? I have to build the disease up stronger. It has to be the greater, stronger force. It has to always be greater. And it has a lot to, because the disease was with me much longer than GreySheet. I only found GreySheet at the end of my 20s. My disease had 30 years on GreySheet. So I have to work really hard to compensate, to make up for that. So the first thing I learned in Cambridge GreySheet was to focus on the disease of the food itself, that I have a physical allergy, that this is not any kind of strange, weird thing. I have a physical allergy to certain foods. And those are the foods that have sugar and carbohydrates. It's basically alcohol, which it's grains and sugars, the same stuff that alcohol is made out of. And by keeping a constant focus on the food, that it gives me the next step of my recovery, which is to constantly remember that this is not a moral issue. It's a physical issue. I'm not a bad person. I'm a person with a really bad disease. It's not a moral issue. And there's freedom in recognizing it's not a moral issue. And after 40 plus years of being in this program and 32 years of abstinence, I still fight that one. I still feel like a bad person. So I am so far from totally recovered. I struggle
5 minutes.
constantly. 5 more? Thank you. It's a chronic disease that needs chronic treatment. So number 3, what is the treatment for this program? First and foremost, I build my life around the program and not the other way around. I don't stick my program into my life. I don't have a job, a family, a relationship, and then sort of squish in the program. I take a blank calendar, whether reality or metaphorically, and I put in all the elements of this program. I put in my phone calls to my sponsor, my 3 phone calls a day. When I sponsor people, they have to give me the time they're going to make their 3 phone calls a day. I put in my meetings, my service, my literature, and put in a plug for Living Abstinent. Time for meals. I should have said that first. When are my meal times? Prayer and meditation. Whatever is left, you can fit your life in there, squeeze in your job, squeeze in your family, but you won't have any of it unless you build your life around the program. Anything I put before my program, I will lose. And I know that because when I was in graduate school, I was abstinent. And because I was abstinent, I could function in graduate school. So slowly I started putting my graduate school work before my program and missing meetings. And the day that I got my graduate degree, which meant the world to me, I lost my abstinence. I will lose anything. And that was the beginning of a 3-year clawing back to get it. Number 4, feelings are not instruction manuals. Feelings are not instructions. I ate over my feelings. I ate for feelings of hunger, of craving, of anger, of hurt, of resentment, of isolation, of loneliness. I ate, I self-medicated with food. Today, I think of my life along 2 tracks, like 2 geometric lines. And you know from geometry, they never meet. They go parallel towards infinity. As long as they don't bend, they'll never meet. One side are my feelings. They can be crazy. They can be full of cravings, obsessions, insanity. The other side is what I do with my food. They never meet. Abstinence is a verb. It's what I do. It's not what I feel. Abstinence is what I do. It's not what I feel. Which gets me to the next, number 5. Expect to want to eat. Expect that you're going to want to eat. I expect that I'm going to want to eat. Thank God it's not every minute of every day, but believe me, it happens. And by expecting it, I prepare for that feeling. It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't make me think I'm doing something wrong. It doesn't make me feel hopeless. I treat it as a gift of remembrance. Oh, right, there's that bloody disease. I have a disease that tells me I don't have a disease, so I prepare for when I want to eat. And how do I do that? Number 6, I think about the space. Remember those 2 lines? Well, everything in between them, between those 2 lines, is the space between the craving and the eating. They never have to meet. So when I was eating, I didn't know there was a space. I thought it was just one long thing, or not so long. I wanted to eat. I had a craving. I ate. It was just one unit. There was no way to divide it. There was no space. The desire and the eating were one and the same. Today, it's all about recognizing there's this enormous chasm, and I don't have to, nothing has to connect the 2 sides. What do? I fill that space with the program. I fill it with the program, and I fill it with people. People, meetings, literature, people. The opposite of addiction is connection. I have to fill that space with the program. Feelings never have to dictate ever again what I do with my food, because I'm going to fill that space with program. The opposite of addiction is connection. And then the final thing before I end is I say to myself, and then what? What I mean by that is if I pick up the food, then what? Follow it through, because I know where the food's going to take me. I know where it's going to take me. I know in my heart of hearts where it's going to lead. I might pretend I don't, but I do know.
That's done. Peggy.
I also know where my abstinence will take me, and it takes me to a place of hope. It may not take me to a perfect life, but it takes me to a life of hope, and a life that is the opposite of despair and isolation. And it's keeping me part of this fellowship. So thank you for allowing me to share my steps with you. And I don't eat no matter what.